Hi, my name is John Sinnott. I'm with you again to talk about our favorite topic, that of COVID, and we're actually watching the evolution of a pandemic right before our eyes. It's a pandemic of a pathogen that we really don't know anything about. It's almost like a curve in the road that never ends. Every time we go around the bend, there's something new, and this virus has a new trick up its sleeve. The new current trick is a variant of concern, Omicron. What happened? November 11th, using the scientific Pango definition, B11.529, was isolated in Botswana at the Botswana Harvard affiliated lab. November 18th, it was isolated in Gauteng province, north of Johannesburg. November 26th, the World Health Organization met emergently, which is highly unusual, to decide what to do with this agent. They immediately declared it within hours a variant of concern, their highest rank for a threat to humanity. On November 30th, it was confirmed in 19 countries, up from 13 the day before. What do we know? Well, some of the facts are there are 32 mutations alone in the spike protein, okay? That's a huge amount. If you were to look at the Delta agent, it had 6, and Alpha had 2. So this is a serious issue. I look at it almost as a different virus. There are also mutations of great significance in what's called the furin cleft. And if you recall looking at a three-dimensional model of the virus, it binds the ACE receptor with a V-like domain. If that V-like domain is variable, wider, different conformation, it would have the ability to perhaps infect other species, which I'll come to in a moment, but I think is a truly alarming development. It definitely has the possibility, because of a wider range, to more readily infect human cells. The diagnosis is via polymerase chain reaction, and it's sort of interesting the way it's done, because here on PCR, your structural proteins, the structural RNA, is positive and the same, but the spike of Omicron does not register. So it's a person with the symptoms of COVID, but a negative spike antigen and a positive structural protein, the tip-off. Finally, importantly for travelers and for those of us using rapid testing is not affected. Rapid testing will affect this variant, which is good news because people have a lot of time and effort in trying to get a rapid test acceptable, sensitive, and specific. On our next page, here, we have questions. These are not my questions. I would tell you these are our questions as a society, as scientists. What do we need to know? Well, how transmissible is it? In one article I read, not peer-reviewed, had the opinion it was roughly twice as transmissible as the Wuhan strain. In other words, somewhat like alpha or beta. But yet another article felt it was 5 to 6 times as transmissible as Delta. If that's true, we have a global pandemic that we won't know what to do with. That would be an extraordinarily dangerous situation. But we don't know. It will probably take us 10 days to get that data. What about severity of illness? One group has said the patients aren't as sick, Another group says the patients are as sick. I would point out it's difficult to compare South Africa to America. Recall Africa has a much younger population than America does. So comparing a 23-year-old young man from Africa does not compare well to a 63-year-old man in America with heart disease and COPD. So until we have these differences ironed out, we can't say whether it's better or worse, or more lethal or less lethal. It's something we have to learn empirically by watching the course of this pandemic unfold. Is there vaccine resistance? There appears to be some breakthrough in the vaccine world. We don't know how much, but a number of patients infected with Omicron have been vaccinated. They've been vaccinated not so much with mRNA vaccines, but with the other vaccines available. What species are infected? They're currently sampling animals now. One of the worst threats we could face was that if this jumped the species barrier again and ended up in livestock, we would not just have a pandemic, we'd have a world facing starvation if it got into pigs, sheep, cows, animals of that nature that are fundamentals of our food. So I'd like you to think about that, and we need to stay tuned to see what our veterinarian colleagues find. Travel bans. A number of nations have issued travel bans, and they sound like a great idea. Probably the way TSA sounded 20 years ago. Travel bans give us time to prepare, to get our protective equipment in order, build up our ICU supplies, retrain our doctors, nurses, and caregivers. But in the long run, viruses don't do a good job of recognizing borders, and Omicron will be here. Right now, I would say there's about a 40% chance Omicron is in the United States now and not recognized, because simply in America, we don't do enough sequencing. Britain does far more than we do. We need to do a better job there. What about the interaction between Omicron and influenza? We don't have data on that, but we do have data from China. Recall that in China, influenza is endemic. It's there all the time. So in the early days of the pandemic, the Chinese noticed that you were 6 times as likely to die if you were infected with a coronavirus and an influenza virus. They're synergistic and a deadly combination. This is a lot for one day. I wanted to bring you up to date, to alert you to this, to ask you to please get vaccinated. Number 2, wear a mask in a crowd. Number 3, wash your hands. Number 4, socially distance. These sound antiquated and everything, but they work. Many of these thoughts about social distancing and masks came from Dr. Tom Tuttle, who helped fight the great influenza pandemic in 1918, a man to whom we owe a debt of gratitude and a primary line of defense against this extraordinarily vicious pathogen. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll tune in again.